Well, actually, this is as real as it gets.
The number you have reached, 911, has been changed to a non-published number.
You're listening to UCW Radio.
In your face.
Give it to me, baby.
All right, welcome to the UCW Radio Show, and as you guys know, we've been doing this for quite some time, and we bring a lot of amazing people on this show so that we can join them in telling their story, so you guys can listen to it. You can actually view it now because we're doing the video version, and today is no different. Today we have a very special guest, and she is known as the martial arts woman. All right, so we're going to welcome right now Andrea Harkins to the UCW Radio Show. Andrea, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
Good. I'm glad you were able to take some time for us.
Yeah, I so appreciate it. I really do. Thank you.
No, this is good stuff. I want you to tell your story because you do a lot of things. You're a martial artist. You've been doing this quite some time. You're a blogger. You have a podcast now. You're an author. You authored 2 books, and you have a lot of things going on. And the best part about it, so for you guys that are listening and viewing, is that you motivate young girls and women to be the best they can be. And then right now with what's happening in the United States, we had history that was made recently. The first female vice president. So a lot of things are in front of you, and you're smiling because you know how that helps to empower women. Yeah. So let's start with you. Let's have a starting point so that we can share your story.
Well, absolutely. I began martial arts 32 years ago. I don't know how time goes by so fast, but it was the beginning of my martial art. And in the back there, you can see a couple of my little awards and things. But
we got to get your mic. We got to get your mic.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, better. I just want to make sure everybody's hearing because you were a little bit muffled for a minute.
Oh, all right. Is this good?
Much better. Go ahead.
Now I'm up close and personal here.
There you go. Up close. People want to see you. They want to see what's going on.
So I began not of my own reasoning. My husband really wanted to start martial arts, and it was a year after we were married, 30. So I started 32 years ago, and he wanted to go. So I said, all right, I'll go along. I'll go along with you. We'll do this together, kind of thing. But I really didn't like it all that much. The first couple of classes, I was like, I don't think this is for me. All this kicking and yelling and people throwing each other, I don't think that fits me. And of course, I'm 57, so I was born in the era when you were taught really to, be calm and be kind, and so yelling and kicking and all that stuff just didn't seem to fit what I was supposed to be doing. So it took me a while to overcome that, but I did, and ended up really enjoying martial arts. So my husband and I practiced together. We went all the way through our 2nd degree black belt together. And then we began our teaching history, where we taught underprivileged kids for 7 years.
Oh, nice.
And then we taught for our own instructor, during those times when we were earning our belts. Mm-hmm. Then we taught at a YMCA for many years. So, and I've taught self-defense and all these different things over time. So it's been a wonderful journey for me. And I got to the point when I was about 57 years ago, when I thought, I'm doing a lot of volunteer work at different places, different things, but how can I use what I already know? How can I use my own skills and talents to do some sort of outreach? And that's when I began my blog, which was called the Martial Arts Woman Blog. Mm-hmm. It's not dedicated solely to women. It's about positivity and martial arts, and really for everyone, a lot of life lessons and stories and ways to keep inspired yourself. And that kind of began my transformation into the martial arts woman.
It was unintended, but it happened.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it's great. I do so many things now because of martial arts. That's one of the things I tell women and I tell, stories about, is that I wouldn't be doing anything that I'm doing today if not for martial arts. You mentioned that I write and do all these different things, and we'll get into that. But my martial art history really is, I'm an average woman who learned a martial art, and somehow that empowered me and inspired me to be more than I ever thought I could be. And that's one of the main lessons that I really teach.
Well, you always had it. You always had it in you. So martial arts just brought it out. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show. We spoke for a little bit, and I never brought you on the show, and I was like, I need to bring you on the show because you're empowering women and young girls to do more. And the reality is that they need that. They need the motivation, inspiration, because in my view, that these young girls can do as much as the young boys, and women can do as much as the men. It's about believing that you can, and you're helping to fuel that fire that is there that they don't even know about.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's because it happened to me. It fueled my fire, I guess, so to speak. I woke up and realized, and it's not about how much you know about martial arts. It's not, it's not the typical stuff that people think, that martial arts are just physical. It's about learning more about yourself. Yep. And that's what happened to me. And for a lot of women, men and women see martial arts differently too. A lot of times women are doing it for a personal journey. That's not always the case with the guys. They often want the physicality and the ability to get out their aggression and learn new things, whereas a lot of times the women call it a personal journey. I want to see how far I can push myself. I want to see if I'm able to do these things that I'm seeing other people do. So that's why it's so inspiring. It's really, and I tell people all the time, you don't have to be the best martial artist to make a difference in the world. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to do competitions. Martial arts simply make you more. And like you touched on, you're already someone. You're already someone on the inside, and they do help you bring out the rest of that you don't think about and you don't see.
Well, and martial arts is a personal thing. It's a personal journey. Not everyone is the same. You go and if people get into martial arts because they want to fight, that's the wrong reason. There's a lot more to it, and we know this. The spiritual, the mental toughness. The fighting. That's just a benefit from what you're actually doing. And what when you said that you and your husband have been doing this for 32 years. Okay. I don't know a lot of people that are married 32 years, 20 years, but when I see that, there's always something there that keeps you together. And maybe martial arts is that thing. Maybe it's the support factor. I love speaking. See, and I wish your husband was here because then we can talk about relationships too, because that's all a part of everything that's you. So that's why I didn't bring you on the show just to talk about a book. I brought you on the show to talk about you and the journey, because this is what people want to hear. And you don't hear that a lot from when you go on shows and stuff. You don't get these conversations. I like these conversations because they're real. And this is what we're having, a conversation. So I want to know more about how you, when you started the blog, your intent was to do what? To go and share your motivational stories. What was the intent with that?
Yeah, I had a very basic mission, and the mission was to change the world for the better through martial arts and positivity. It was just something that came to me. I was like, this is what my mission is with this. I want to use my stories. I want to use martial arts, and I want to use positivity to remind people that they are capable of more than they think, to help them overcome and know that there are better days ahead. So a lot of it was, it's like using martial arts and life in parallel. And so I would tell stories, I would delve into some of the more difficult times in my life, for instance, and tell a little bit about it and say, this is how I use martial arts to overcome that very personal life issue. And part of that really was, for instance, learning how to break boards, if we can take that as an example. So I had a fear of doing that. I really, again, it was that innate thing in me where I said, I don't break things, I don't fight, and that I had to overcome over the years. So when it came to breaking a board, I thought, I don't know if I can do this. And the first time I broke a board, I was at my green belt exam. Hadn't broken one before.
Right.
And didn't know I was going to have to break one that day. But my instructor called me up and he had a couple of boards together and he said, do a front jump kick and break the boards. And I think it was 2 or 3 boards. I don't know. But so the first thing in my mind was, I can't do this. So I jumped up, kicked it, and my foot just bounced off. And it was like very embarrassing because there was a big audience of people there. And second time, I thought to myself, okay, all right, just, do this. And I did the same thing and nothing happened again. And there was a large audience and you start hearing them like, oh, like concerned for me, embarrassed for me. And so I had to turn around and regroup and stood there and I said to myself, I can do this. I can do this. I just said it over and over. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. And I turned around and I did it and it broke and it was so easy to do. And I was amazed. And I used that moment all the time in my life. And that's what I tell people. You can use these board break moments in your life to know that when you're facing something you're afraid of, or you're facing something you're not sure of, if you could break a board back then and you're afraid of it, you can do this. If you can earn a black belt, you can do this.
I like that story. I like that story. I want to touch on that story because when you went to go break that board, and I'm just trying to picture it. You're there, you're in your stance, you go to break the board, he's holding it, it doesn't break. Okay.
Yeah.
Now what happens? What happens with the crowd? This is an important thing. What happens? What's their reaction when it didn't happen?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
From what I recall, it was just silence.
Silence. Okay. Now, and when you went to do it the second time, then there was like, oh no.
Yeah. There was what I call a hush.
Yeah.
It was a hush.
And then when you did it, then the crowd erupted. That's a point that I want to make with that because, for those that are listening and viewing, that you have to shut out the background noise. Doesn't matter whether it's a cheer, whether it's a boo, whether it's silence, because if you listen to that stuff, it'll get you here. And that's why I'm glad you brought that story up because a lot of times people allow what's happening around them to impact them, and you powered through that, and through your writings and everything, you're allowing other young girls and even young boys and women and men to kind of live through you a little bit, so they know that hey, you're gonna fail, but you can't let the things that are going around you force you to stop. Because when you stop, it's over.
Yeah, exactly. You have to, and that's another little mantra that I use, and I write it a lot in Facebook or on different photos, and it says, keep pushing through. That's all you need to do. And whether we're talking about martial arts or whether we're talking about life, it works for both. In martial arts, you're going to come upon skills and techniques and things that scare you, that you don't want to do, or that you just don't like. But you have to keep pushing through. Because if you want to continually grow, even if you're not working toward belts, just the personal growth, you have to push through those moments. And of course, in life, it's the same. If an obstacle comes along, you can't just get stuck there and decide I'm not going to do anything and never move forward. You have to continually push through. So those are some of the definite life lessons that I feel come from martial arts and that I try to teach others.
But sometimes some people, when they're going through things, it's a reflex action to freeze and do nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you're showing them that you have to do something because the reality is that no action is worse it's worse
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
what are you doing? You're allowing whatever is going to happen
Yeah.
to happen when you can actually do something better. So that's
Yeah.
fantastic. So now
Yeah.
you're writing the blog, you're reaching a gazillion billion people out there, and you decided to do what? To write a book? I mean, is this?
Well, I mean, a lot of things happened after that. A lot of things. I began the blog. The blog, was popular. Is still popular. I started writing for martial art magazines. I sent a query in to one magazine, and they accepted it, and I began writing for them for a long-term basis. And then a couple of magazines in the UK reached out, and I started writing for them.
Nice.
And then I wanted to write a book. And I had a publisher. Since then, I've self-published, but I had a publisher, and he said, what would be really great for this book? Because it was going to be a book about me. It was still going to be called The Martial Arts Woman, but it was going to be a book about my life and a lot of the interesting things that have happened and how I use martial arts.
Oh, do you notice this? Do you notice this behind me? Hopefully you can see it. Okay.
Yeah.
You're all over the place. We would have had the graphics over here, but we're transitioning on Vera, but I figured I'd show you that so the viewers can see that stuff too.
Yeah. That's the martial arts woman back there. So he gave me the idea of also integrating into the book, it's called the Martial Arts Woman book, stories from other women. And so that's what I did. So half the book are stories from other women about their journeys, not just about martial art practice. This is about how they overcame cancer as martial artists, how they overcame other illnesses, how they applied martial arts to their life and their families. It's just, it's stories that are incredible, really. You read them and you're like, I can't believe somebody could even do that. And they consider themselves just the average martial art woman. So that's what happened. I wrote that book. And
stories like that are what inspire people, because if you embrace something, and I'll share this quick thing, Robert Downey Jr., when he was younger, he was drinking, drugs, everything else. He had a lot of problems. And then what he did, he embraced Wing Chun. And by him doing that, he said that changed his life, and I find that to be a very cool story, because that's someone that was high up on a mountain. He had all these problems. Everybody was like, forget about him. He's not worth it. And he turned things around after they found him naked in a car. Anyway, but he turned things around, but it was due to martial arts. And I think stories like that, as you see how it came to that, is like bad, but you see the end result, which is now good. So, and then the stories you're talking about, women overcoming, dealing with cancer and things like that, and using martial arts to be better, be healthier, be whatever, and be in a better frame of mind is powerful. That's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
In your book, how many women in the martial arts woman, how many stories of women do you have in there?
I don't know. There's numerous. I have it right here. There's
show us the cover. Show us the cover of the book.
Yeah, here's the cover.
That's the cover. See, that's what's behind me too, people. But I just, that's a big book. See, you have something to read. You guys buy this book. You have something to read that may motivate you.
There's so much in here. If I just glance through it, so we have sections on mindset, validation. I mean, there's how many chapters there are, and there's more. So here's a list of the contributors. And so we talk about femininity, the fighter, training, courage, positive and spiritual. But the stories are so interesting. One of the stories is a woman who was like one of the last to escape from Vietnam. She's Vietnamese.
Oh, wow.
And she talks about coming to America in this boat that was rocking and rolling with no food, water everywhere. Not sure she would even make it here. And I think she was a teenager at the time. But she got here. She worked hard. She's a master, high-ranking martial artist. So, I mean, how do you even do that? That's just the courage of the martial arts woman.
Yeah. No, I mean, see stories like that. I mean, I love stories like that because normally, and again, this is why I do my show too. Normally, you don't hear the backdrop. Normally, you don't see what's going on. You see what's
Yeah.
there now. Because people, when they look at someone that's successful, they see the success. They don't see all the failures, all the struggle, all the stuff you go through to become who you are. And everyone goes through it, and you've gone through it, I'm sure. Okay, and the women you have in your book have gone through it. Okay, and what you've done, 32 years in the martial arts, I'm sure that you had moments where you had those valleys, and and you had to yank yourself up, and and martial arts helped you to get through that.
Yeah, always. I always turn to it, and again, not always to the physical part of it, although kicking and punching a bag is great, right, for stress or whatever. So that does work. But I always turn to it in my own mind about the power that I have within that I shouldn't ignore. If I am not sure about something, that I need to really just push through and keep going. And that's what we all must do, especially in the world. I'm not political at all. We have a strange world, let's say, right now. And it's so important to be confident and to be positive right now, because so much changes and you feel unsteady sometimes about it. That's when it's really important to go within, to live in the here and now for a little bit of time and reflect about what's good and positive in your life. Martial arts certainly is always one thing that I always am so appreciative that I have, that I can not only be, physically fit and flexible and mindful, but that I can apply that to the everyday living and make life better, make life happier. It's not perfect. There's no perfect, but it's a great tool, let's say.
Yeah, and then you're also, when you dove into martial arts, you entered a different world. A community. And I'm not saying that all martial artists are the best, because I've come across my share of them.
Yeah.
But if you get the good ones, you get the good people.
Yeah.
Because that's what you have, good and bad people. You get the good people, and you create those bonds. Those bonds last for the rest of your life. And that's like with your book. All these women are in there. I'm pretty sure that at some point in time, one connected with another, and then all of a sudden you have just this connectivity that continues to go forward. And that's what we are as humans, right? We have to connect. If you're not connecting, then you're disconnected. Then you wind up living in the woods in a shed doing whatever you're doing there. I don't know, So now, moving forward, you had that one book. You did a book. Did you do a book before that, or this was your?
No, I did a book. The second book. So after this first one, The Martial Arts Women, I did buy the publishing rights back so I could self-publish it.
Okay.
And then since I knew how to self-publish, I went ahead and wrote this one, and this is called Martial Art Inspirations for Everyone.
Okay.
So this kind of encompasses a lot of what I'm talking about. If you look at the chapters, greatness, find it within. That's not necessarily a martial art topic, but it's sort of like a little reflection that you can read, and it always incorporates martial art mindset or martial art thoughts in it.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, when I was younger, I got involved in martial arts, and of course, Bruce Lee was the thing. But I was an avid reader, so I read all his writings and everything, the Tao and everything, and I read all this stuff. And when you go through it, you see this fighting style, but you also see a lot of philosophy and a lot of words like this that make you reflect and say, yeah, that makes sense. Or maybe that doesn't make sense. And wow, I can look at things a little bit differently. So this is what you're doing with your book, because it's not just about fighting and just the martial arts way. It's about a way, period.
Yeah. And this one touches on things like overcoming obstacles, change, how to be a positive influence, no limits, uniqueness, sacrifice, overcoming. So it's just like a couple of pages each one, and you just read it like maybe daily or something like that, and you have a powerful way to start your day. I am actually working on my third book, which I've been working on really for a couple of years, and that's how to start your own martial art program.
Okay.
This one is like a how-to book for people who want to start a program. Now, in the times we're in right now, a lot of people are closing their brick and mortar schools because of the situation. However, that doesn't mean you can't try again in some other way. I'm a proponent of adapting to change and finding flexibility in your thought and who you are. And the new book, How to Start Your Own Martial Art Program, gives insights and training and thoughts on how to start a program that's portable, where you go to the Y and you teach there, you go to a senior center, or you go to a teen center, or you go to a school. You can kind of move about and teach in different places if that's your thing. It's also great for newly minted black belts, for instance, who want to start their own program and they're not sure how to start it, and they want to teach on their own or with their friend or whatever, and so you can get started. So it's a fun little topic, and I think even though we're in tough times, that it will be something that martial artists will look toward to begin again, maybe, or to try something new. So
they have to right now, because with the brick and mortar schools, you can't get together now, and this is why. And just because we're on Vero, this is why on Vero Hive we allow, or we set something up for martial art teachers and instructors to utilize this so they can stay in touch with their students, and you need tools like this to keep things alive and keep in touch, because if not, it's going to be very difficult when things open up to open up that brick and mortar school again, because all these students are elsewhere, and then you lose any foundation you built, you wind up losing, and that's pretty sad. That's pretty sad.
Yeah, tough times.
Yeah.
Tough times.
So you're giving them tools. You're giving them tools so they can go and get prepared for the next thing that's going to happen. So you wrote the 2 books, and then you decided, hey, I'm going to have a podcast, and that was your next thing. We got to keep yourself busy. But before we go into the podcast, I need to ask you something. You've been training with your husband 32 years. Yeah. Okay, you guys were teaching underprivileged kids. Yeah. How, and I want to touch on this because this is giving back, and giving back is so important. When you did that, what brought you to do that? There had to be something that said, "Hey, we should do this," because that's the good guy stuff or good girl stuff. But that's the good stuff that you got to do in the world.
Well, and I have a beautiful story that came from all that time as well. So this was back when we were maybe newly minted black belts. We had been teaching for our own instructor since the green belt, so we knew everything and we were doing good, but we wanted a way to.
While he was drinking coffee, you were teaching a class. I know how it works. He was having a muffin.
We wanted to find a way to do some volunteer work, and we thought, well, this is a great thing to do because, one, we can practice becoming better teachers. Right. We can teach kids who can't afford martial arts. And we can, go into a community that lacks resources and where the kids and families really need to understand self-defense. It's a tough place. It's a tough, dark place. Yeah. So we did that. We went in there. We thought we were going to do it for a year. It was a year where we were going to get experience. We were going to start this program. We would memorialize it. So we had sort of a book to work from when we wanted to branch out or whatever it might be. But somehow that year turned into 7 years. It was crazy. It just kept going. And staff would come and go all the time. But we were always there, always there. The kids and families always knew we were there. Now, there was a young boy and girl. And I'll just say we were the only white people, anywhere in this area. Mm-hmm. But there was a boy and girl, a brother and sister, and their grandfather was their caregiver. And he brought them to class, and they were always there. And unexpectedly, after a couple of years of us teaching and everything, he died. He passed away. Oh, wow. I think it was after an operation or something had gone wrong, and the caregiver passed away. And the boy, Paul, came to my husband and I, and he said, will you guys adopt me? Will you adopt me and my sister? And I thought, oh my gosh, my heart was broken because he didn't know what was going to happen to him. Right. So my husband and I actually began talking about it and discussed that we would look into it. And we started looking into adopting him and his sister.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, though, a relative of theirs came forth from out of state and was able to take them in. And that was the last time I saw them after they left with their relative. And they had, let me rephrase the time period. I think they had practiced with us for several years. I mean, it was more than just 2 or 3 years. It was probably a good 5 of the time we were there.
Right.
And that was the last time I saw them. But last year, someone called me on the phone. And I answered the phone. And he said, hi, do you remember me? Do you know who this is? And I knew instantly who it was. It was Paul. It was young Paul that I almost adopted. And he had been in the military. He's grown up now. And he said, I have never forgotten about you and your husband. I've never forgotten all of the things that you did for us. And I know that I asked you to adopt me and you actually almost did it. And that was so amazing. I'll never, ever forget you for that. So that was the full circle, right? That was the, you do something because it's right. And sometime down the road, it comes back to you and you made a difference. So that's the best thing I could ever do.
Like on Wall Street, you have impact investing. What you have, you impact invested your time, and you had an impact on someone's life, a child's life forever. When you do that, I mean, this kid, he could have went this way, that way, but you showed him a way that he can get through this toughness that he had to go through. And what did he do? He went into the military. He grew up to be a good man. And he wanted to let you know that it had to do with you and your husband. So kudos to you guys. And see, stories like that this is the backdrop that no one hears. They're hearing it now. And because this stuff is important. This stuff is important because, when you're doing and you're involved in martial arts, you're involved in entertainment, whatever you're doing, you have to give back to invoke some type of change somewhere. Because if you don't do that, what are you, a taker? You have to be more of a giver than a taker.
Right.
And this is you guys did this for 7 years.
7 years. Yeah.
And I'm sure that probably doesn't show up in your books or anything, and I'm glad that we were talking about it on here. So now that I got that story out of you, now we're going to talk about your podcast, because your podcast, you decided to do that. And I'm going to let you tell the story with that, because I haven't listened to your podcast, don't know too much about it. All I know is that you said you have one. I said, oh, okay, this is cool. We're going to talk about this, because if it's anything like your books, you're motivating people.
Yeah. So the podcast came about, and it's kind of funny. I tried podcasting a few years ago, but I didn't really know what to do. And it was technically a little difficult for me. So I only did it on and off. And really, it was just me talking about inspirational topics. Mm-hmm. That was what I did. And I still do that now on Facebook Live. You'll catch me almost every morning on there, just doing some little inspirational thing. And I'm interviewed on podcasts all the time. Mm-hmm. But I was interviewed on one podcast recently, and it was a woman and a friend of mine. She's a martial artist, and she was interviewing me for her podcast. And somehow something clicked after that interview. And I thought, you know what? I can do this. Mm-hmm. I can do this kind of podcast. This was really easy. I can do this. And I started thinking, what would I want to do? Maybe I could interview other martial art women. I already know my story. My story I've told so many times. I don't need to keep telling it.
Right.
And I can interview other people. So I got downloaded the software, and I was like, okay, let's give it a try. I contacted one of the martial artist women that I know. I said, hey, do you want to be my guinea pig for the martial arts woman podcast? I don't know what I'm doing, but are you willing to jump in? She's like, sure. So I contacted her, and we talked for a while, and it was really interesting. And then I realized I have so many women martial art friends on Facebook, on social media. Let me reach out. And so I get their biographies. I get some photos. I go through the biography. I set up a bunch of questions based on their biography. And we start talking. And they are like treasure chests. Mm-hmm. again, like some of the stories that you've asked me today, you would have never known if you didn't ask.
Right, exactly.
Same thing happens here.
Because you're listening to them. Because you're listening to them.
Same thing happens here. I mean, just amazing. One of the women, 83 years old, tested for her 5th degree black belt. We talked about that. Hey, I mean, how many people do that? And how many people know about that?
That's awesome. That is, I want to talk that. That's awesome, though. I love stuff like that because, again, these are the stories you don't hear. And that's, I just love hearing that. Just love hearing that stuff.
That's why I love this, because it's the stories you never hear.
Yep.
And these women think that they're just average martial art stories, but they're not. They're so inspiring. I've had, the more well-known people on, like Kathy Long and Restita De Jesus and Trina Pellegrini. And, that I've had a host of the more well-known, but you know what? They have stories too that people have not heard.
Sure.
And there is a theme. I'll say that there is a theme of, I've also had Anna Maria DeMars on, the world judo champion.
Yeah, she's everyone you mentioned, I know.
So those are the more well-known, but they're not all the more well-known.
Yeah.
Some of them are just, people I know on Facebook.
Anna Maria's story, her story is pretty cool because I've had her on when we're in Ohio and everything. Very good person. Her story is awesome, and people that don't know her, that's Ronda Rousey's mom, and she is a legend in her own right. I know. The Hall of Fame, everything else. Jean LaBelle taught her, and taught Ronda too. So it's a lot of good stuff there. But when you come across people like that, it's great. Like even with this show, you bring somebody on, they have a big name, okay. Like I remember I had Dennis Christopher on, and we're talking about stuff. And he thinks I'm interested in Chariots of Fire, all this stuff. I said, no, I want to know about you. And when it's all said and done, he said, that's the best interview I've had in 30 years. I said, because if you're listening, you're telling a story that people want to hear. That's what you're doing with your podcast. I love it. I love it.
It's so great. And every woman has had an interesting story to share. But there is a theme, and it's a little dark because I've noticed that a lot of these women have been abused in some way or traumatized, and that's why they've turned to martial arts. So it's a little sad in one way to hear these stories, and not all of them by any means are like that. And most of them are recovered, or at least on the road to recovery from these situations, and can talk about them from a distance.
Right.
But there is a theme there. But there's another theme that I see in martial art women that a lot of people don't recognize, and that is that a lot of them are entrepreneurs. No. Whether they own their own school or they own some other company or business, they are strong women in the business community. So I think because they often have to overcome certain obstacles in their life, that they then take control and say, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And so it's been very interesting. But there's a lot of just very insightful, wonderful stories. And I hope people take a listen. It's called the Martial Arts Women Podcast. It's on every major podcast platform. And you'll see kind of from the titles what we're going to talk about in each of the shows. But they're really inspiring. So I hope people take a listen to that. But that's how I began it. And now I'm just, on this roll where I asked on Facebook the other night, please nominate someone you'd like to be on the show. Never expected like hundreds of names to come in for different martial art women that people wanted to nominate to be on the show. So it's definitely a platform. The other thing that's important about what I do is that I do provide a platform for other women to tell their martial arts stories, their journeys, because there are really no platforms like that. If you look on social media, for instance, there's a lot of groups, and I'm a part of a lot of them, but they're still mostly male dominated.
No, that's the world of martial arts where, honestly, martial arts, and I've seen some great martial artists that are women. They just don't get they don't get the recognition. That's why I mentioned Anne Maria, because she is a high end world champion, big time medals and everything else in the Hall of Fame, International Sports Hall of Fame, everything. But a lot of people, they know of her, but they don't know her story the way they should. But I'm glad. That's good that you have that platform, especially now during this pandemic. You hear about it all the time, that people are home and then you have domestic violence that's taking place. And I think that these women that may be going through this stuff, they need something to empower them, to help them to get through it, and maybe give them that guiding light that, hey, I'm going to get through this, and maybe I just need to hear someone's story that is like my story.
Yeah.
And you make that connection, and that's what you're doing with that. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So how many episodes do you have in of the Martial Arts Woman podcast?
There's probably about 25 in right now.
Okay, and you're going strong. You're on a roll. You're going to keep going.
I can just keep scheduling them because there's so many stories I want to have on the show. So many women I want to have on the show. So there's a pipeline of interesting content that's coming through, and I'm just going to keep on going with that. Once I start something, I stick with it for a long, long time. So I'm excited about it.
That's good for the women out there, the community at large. You're going to have something that's going to continue to grow and have legs and continue to motivate and inspire. You're working on your third book. You have your podcast, you're doing, well, right now there are no speaking engagements, but I'm sure, on social media, you're connecting with people and having your little talks and everything, which is good because people need that motivation. They need something. Yeah. They need something. Yeah. That's something you're doing. And you're not teaching right now because the brick and mortar environment's not there. Are you doing online teaching or no?
No, actually, I don't actively teach. I haven't been teaching in a couple of years. I moved from Florida to Arizona a couple of years ago, and I have not actively been teaching. I teach self-defense occasionally.
Right.
So I just practice. I'm practicing Tai Chi now. And
you were the one that didn't vote. I'm joking. Arizona's been up in the air with stuff.
Yeah, it was my vote. Yeah.
It was your vote that caused the problem. But yeah, it's this journey of yours. Yeah. It's pretty cool, and I'm glad that I brought you on to go over this, because otherwise I wouldn't have known this. I just know that you were the martial arts woman and you wrote a book. Okay. And then now speaking with you, now I saw a little bit more about you. Again, I wish your husband was here, because then I can hear his stories too. And that's always a good thing when I have a couple on, because the relationship part of it is important too, because that's what helps you to get through the day. He's there for you, you're there for him, but you have your days, he has his days, and as you have that balance. I mean, you're together like a gazillion years right now, what, 37, 32, whatever amount of years. But that's good. That's good, because how many people are together that long? How many people have that connection to be together that long? So if anyone that's viewing this, listening to this, take that as an example. You can make it happen if you want to. You got to go. You got to have that. You got to have that someone special, and it's not always easy to find that someone special, but you do at some point in time. So, but anyway, so let's let the. I have a question for you. Okay. If you, in closing, if you had to give any advice to anyone, what advice would you give them? All right, I think we lost Andrea, so we're going to close out the show. I was hoping that the connection would come together, but obviously That's something that is not happening. So what we're going to do is basically you can look her up, the martial arts woman, and you can find out more about her. And we'll put some stuff on the website so you guys can actually see. Appreciate you tuning into the UCW Radio Show, and we will be back with you with another episode, another great guest. Thank you so much. Enjoy your evening and the rest of your week.
Initiating shutdown sequence.
You're listening to UCW Radio in your face.
What is your major malfunction?
So let it be written. So let it be done.
Ladies and gentlemen, my mother thanks you, my father thanks you, my sister thanks you, and I thank you.